Here's what nobody tells you about running an AI sprint. You think you're going to learn about AI, but what you actually learn is who's on the boat. Hi, this is Mark Sirkin, and this is Playbook Broken. This is episode 3 of the Walk West AI Transformation 30-Day Challenge. Quick orientation. We're doing a 30-day sprint. It's 4 teams, 4 mentors, 30 days. We're in week 3. First 2 episodes were about friction and process, both true but incomplete. The other thing this sprint is doing is showing who is on the boat. And by being on the boat, what I mean is people who experiment by people who wait. Not a moral judgment, but a behavioral signal, and an important one in the age of AI. AI surfaces this faster than any other kind of work that I've seen recently. Pretending otherwise would be dishonest to listeners running their own version of this. AI surfaces this really fast. Most organization change moves slow enough to hide. AI sprints, and sprints in general, compress that window to days or weeks. Build cost is low. The barrier for trying ends up being just a browser tab, Claude running on your machine. Waiting for permission is itself the signal. I heard the CEO of Infotech on a webinar, and 3 things stuck for me. Number 1 is ultimately unlimited access, no cost ceiling, no gatekeeping, removing every reason someone could say, I couldn't try. Obviously, token maxing being what that is, maybe you need to be a little careful about that. How they processed the change wasn't a top-down rollout, but a continuous loop of build, learn, and restructure. And how they rebuilt processes around that change. They didn't bolt AI onto workflows, but they tore those workflows apart and rebuilt it with AI as the primary input. The result, according to the CEO, 100% of the company working in AI 70% of their time. Remarkable, not because of the tools, but because of how completely they restructured everything around them. 6 months in, people who stayed built. The company actually ended up larger, not smaller, by adding the right people and the right mindset. What our sprint is actually showing is interesting. The team I'm mentoring actually has really gained momentum over the last couple of days. They built multiple prototypes, evolved those prototypes. A few people were waiting for others to tell them what to do, but mostly really positive, really excited, really innovative work. And it's not about technical skill. It's about default behavior under ambiguity and ambiguous circumstances. The builders aren't engineers. They're producers, PMs, designers. There was no permission asking. They didn't wait for training. They just started. And the data the sprint produces is going to be really interesting to look at. It's one of those things you can't unsee, I don't think. Interestingly, our sprint also had cross-team convergence. What the sprint is actually showing us is really interesting. My team, for example, really leaned in. Once they understood the friction framework, they really started to build and build quickly and build a lot, actually. It's really interesting to see what evolved. Some people waited for others to tell them what to do, but in general, everyone kind of rushed ahead. Incredible coordination, actually, across projects and really talking about the issues. All of them, of course, still showed up to do their day jobs. And interestingly, none of this was really about technical skill. It was about this sort of default behavior under ambiguity. What do you do when there are no rules? It was interesting to observe multiple teams independently hit the same wall. Those walls tended to be about process or redesigning process work. So for example, a time tracker app that requires people to change their behavior in their calendars in order to get structured data into the tracker. So it's partially a technology challenge, APIs, MCP servers, but also a workflow and a process change problem, which is different than deploying AI because now you have to expect people to make changes in how they plan their weeks. One wall that I observed is that Walk West has no formal, structured, clean data about itself. So every AI prototype is actually data audit in disguise. As those tools are built, it's like, okay, where's the data for this? Where's the data for that? There are some common systems, Asana, EverHour, Google Drive, but those aren't necessarily consistently used from project to project. And so again, the sort of data structure process stuff ends up being as big or bigger of an issue than the actual AI itself. AI didn't create these problems, but it makes it impossible to ignore them. One person built a tool that asks if the project will hit a certain margin before it gets sold. Interestingly, this project actually didn't end up being one of the final projects, but I want to talk about it because what she discovered in building it was that the margins just wildly vary from project to project and no one's really looking at them. So these projects, they need real data, they need projection data, and then the actual data. What are we going to sell the project for? And ultimately, when the work is done, how much did it actually cost us? This plugs directly into what other teams are surfacing as well in terms of project management and resource planning. Again, all the core data, all the core processes, they're there, but they're unstructured or they're so disparate that you can't even really connect them. And that's not a standalone. A piece of the operating system of any company is discovering it needs these kinds of structures. And a tool that asks whether the company knows if it's profitable is a different category than a productivity tool. I think convergence is a really interesting word here as I think about the teams and the projects and the people. And ultimately, in the next episode, when we see what happened during the readout, I think the builders are discovering that convergence happens because they're building around a similar framework, in this case, WalkWest's agency business. The waiters, the people who they're not on the boat, they didn't discover anything because they didn't try. But the people who were building discovered lots of stuff that I don't think they were even looking for. The data layer revealed itself through prototypes hitting walls. How do you get this data? Where is this data? How do you walk around that wall to get what you want to get? And both signals come from the same place. So I think a lot of this is having candor about the reality of what we're building, why we're building it, and where the data lives. The sprint didn't make those choices. It just made those choices visible. And ultimately, what leadership does with that visibility is the next conversation past this podcast and past this analysis. 3 weeks in, as the mentor of one of the 4 teams, and 7 weeks into this new job, I came here to find leverage. And we're seeing in real time how AI exposes that leverage and everything underneath of it: data, process, people. You can't just pick one because these things all work together. They come together. Next week, we'll get into the readout, talk about what we learned, and we'll go from there. Thanks for listening to Playbook Broken.